For the District of Maryland. I'm joined by the team from my office as well as the FBI and the IRS. You're going to be hearing from Assistant Special Agent in Charge Alfred Watson with the FBI, as well as George Murphy with the IRS after my remarks. Happy to take questions as well. This morning was a sad occasion. Holding public office is a rare privilege and an opportunity to serve the community and get things done that help our community. And unfortunately, the type of fraud and public corruption that Ms. Pugh committed and was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for today undermines everyone's faith in government and what government can do for the people. And this is a tragedy, and it's the last thing that our city needs, especially during the difficult circumstances that we face together. Ms. Pugh's lawyer made a number of remarks, including asking where the victims were in the courtroom today. And he focused on corporate entities like UMMS. But what he didn't acknowledge was that the victims in a case like this that involve a severe betrayal of the public trust over a course of years has a lot of victims. And those victims are all of us, the people in the city of Baltimore, the taxpayers who expect, and they should expect, and they should demand integrity on the part of the officials whom they put in office and expect to serve them and put the city's interests above their own. This was a complicated investigation that took real diligence and hard work to unravel, and for that I'm very grateful to the team at the IRS and the FBI and the gifted staff and prosecutors in my office who made this possible. At this time, you'll hear from Alfred Watson with the FBI.
My name is Alfred Watson. I'm with Assistant Special Agent in Charge with the FBI Baltimore Field Office. This investigation was more than just about the Healthy Holly books. This investigation was about a story of greed, a story of lying, a story of deceit. Simply put, this defendant attempted to scam the city and the taxpayers, and that's never acceptable under any circumstances. This story was also about the fraud that she committed by lying to the taxpayers, by trying to conceal her actions, and the sentence today represents the seriousness of which we take that. I want to thank the special agents of the FBI. I want to thank the special agents of the IRS CID. I also want to thank the forensic accountant and all others who assisted in this matter. Their tireless efforts I saw firsthand. I know that the city should have hope that the commitment that we have to cracking down on corruption, no matter who does it, no matter where it is, no matter how complicated the case, that we are committed to that because the city should expect it, the city deserves it. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy?
Good afternoon. I'm George Murphy. I'm Assistant Special Agent in Charge with IRS Criminal Investigation. Rather than support the City of Baltimore, which she was elected, former Mayor Catherine Pugh chose a path of greed and corruption. She conspired with others to defraud the United States government and betrayed the people which elected her to office. Today, Catherine Pugh was handed the consequences of her actions. Public officials must abide by the laws. This should serve as a reminder to the public that everyone must pay their taxes. Today, IRS criminal investigation will continue to play an essential role in public corruption as our expertise is following the money. Today, I proudly stand with our law enforcement partners, applaud their efforts, and know that we will continue to follow these types of corruption and criminal investigations. Thank you.
Happy to take your questions at this time.
Was the University of Maryland medical system, any of its executives, ever the focus of any part of this federal investigation?
Yeah, I'm not in a position to be able to answer that question at this time, Jane, but rest assured that when federal agents undertake investigations of this type, they're extraordinarily thorough, and the public should be assured that when we come across evidence of wrongdoing, we will follow the facts wherever it will lead, no matter where it leads, without fear or favor.
Does this mark the end of this case?
Yeah, I can't comment on that right now, Jane, but again, I want to assure the public that we are always on the lookout for information of wrongdoing, particularly public corruption and fraud. And if you are in possession of such information, I encourage you to reach out to the federal authorities, including the FBI and the IRS, and you can be sure that we're going to continue to do what we are committed to do, which is to ensure public integrity.
What's the message that's being sent by this actual sentence? Obviously, you asked for more time. You only got 3 years. What's the message?
Well, as you say, the former Mayor Pugh was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, and it is correct that my office asked for a longer term of years. I have enormous respect for Judge Chasnow, and hers is a difficult task. She had to weigh every single factor that came into play here, and I'm confident that she considered everything that she needed to do under the law. So I stand by my office's recommendation, but a moment ago you characterized the sentence as just 3 years in federal prison. I do not view it that way. That is a sentence within the advisory guidelines range, and it should serve as a strong message, and I hope a deterrent to anyone in public life who is thinking about using their public office for personal gain and allowing greed to overcome their sworn duty to serve the interests of the public. This was not a light sentence in my view, and it should not be regarded as such.
Are you satisfied with the sentence?
Again, I have enormous respect for Judge Chasnow. She is a very careful, thoughtful, and diligent jurist, and it's clear that she put a lot of thought into this matter. We did ask for a longer term of years. We believe that was a just sentence in this case. But again, I believe that this sentence does accomplish one of the means of sentencing, or the purposes of sentencing, which is this is a serious offense. Judge Chasnow said it very eloquently in the courtroom that these were serious offenses that occurred over the course of years and did serious damage to the public trust.
Prosecutors mentioned in court that there was an attempt to fix the election through the Healthy Holly books. Do you think that the election was legitimate and she deserved to win, or do you think it undermined the outcome?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment or answer that question at this time. The comments of my team in the courtroom during the sentencing hearing stand for themselves.
Could you speak to the role her reputation played in covering up this case?
Yeah. Well, the point that my prosecutors made during the sentencing hearing, and that Judge Chasnow agreed with, was that it's very true that Ms. Pugh spent and dedicated a significant part of her career to doing good things for the community and making life better for our citizens. But in the end, during the last 7 years of her career, and that was a span of the crimes that she committed in this case, the reputation that she had for responsibility and commitment to the welfare of all citizens actually enabled her to commit the crimes and to continue committing the crimes and to convince people to go along with and to become essentially victims and go along with the crimes that she was committing over a period of years.
How would you describe the role of J.P. Grant in this case?
Yeah. Well, the facts speak for themselves, and I'm not going to go beyond what is stated in the statement of facts and was allocated today during the sentencing hearing. He did provide some funds, and beyond that, I'm not going to comment at this time. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to clarify it at this time. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, everybody.
All right, that was U.S. Attorney Robert Hur, and just hearing from an FBI official, they're saying this was a story of greed, a story of lying, a story of deceit. I believe we're waiting to see if Pugh's defense attorneys will be saying anything. Even though the government had asked for 57 months, U.S. Attorney Robert Hur there seeming content with the 3 years in federal prison. And I want to go now to former state prosecutor Andy Alperstein. Andy, do we have you on the line with us?
I'm here, Mallory.
Andy, we've been talking to you through the course of this case, and what do you make of the sentence, and particularly her age? I mean, she's expected to turn 70 in, I believe, just under 2 weeks.
Well, I think we should talk about what the sentence really means. So when you get sentenced to 3 years in a case like this, she will be entitled to some good conduct credit. That's usually 15%. She's obviously not going to be a disciplinary problem in prison. They'll give her a delayed reporting date. She'll get asked She'll get a letter telling her where to report. She'll most certainly wind up at a prison camp, which is not going to be as hard for her as a traditional prison environment. The reason for that is her age, her lack of criminal record, her compliance with pretrial release, where she was not charged with any crimes.
And Andy, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off right now. We're going to go to former Baltimore Mayor Kurt Schmoke, who's talking to reporters outside the courthouse right now.
Body blow to the body politic. I mean, the city, it was a very serious matter for the entire city, but I think that we can get on to the prospect of healing now, look to the future. But Catherine Pugh never underestimated how serious this was, not only to her, but to the citizens of Baltimore.
But the judge did say, I mean, no one's more familiar with the problems that Baltimore has than you. You saw it through some very dark times as well. And this judge said, look, she used her reputation.
That's right.
And really did serious harm to this city. So do you, again, walking out of here at 3 years, do you think that's fair?
Oh, no, I mean, given all the things that the judge had to consider, I mean, the range, she could have gone up to almost 5 years, I guess, and she balanced a lot of things that Catherine did. But the point that the U.S. Attorney's Office made about how shocking this is was appropriate. It is a shock not only to her career, but a shock to our system here. So, but 3 years, I wouldn't underestimate that. I wouldn't want to spend an hour in jail. So 3 years, I recognize, is a pretty tough sentence.
Yeah. Can you just one last time touch upon your last visit with Catherine?
Yeah, I went to see her at the request of a friend of hers, and I went over to her house and just wanted to try to find out exactly how she was feeling. But in talking to her, she could almost not get through an entire sentence without crying. So I knew that meant that there were some very significant problems. But I think that she's better now, that there's some certainty as to what's going to happen over the next few years.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mallory, if you're still listening to us right now, I do apologize. What you heard Schmoke talking about was the fact that there is concern for the well-being, both physical and mental well-being, of Catherine Pugh. That was one of the things that the judge did take into consideration. Also, as part of the sentencing, they did say that Catherine would have to go through some health evaluations that would be provided for her. So again, still unclear exactly where she will be sentenced to. More information about that will come out, but we're going to go back to the press conference staging area to bring you further information as to what exactly is happening outside the federal courthouse. We are waiting for Pugh's defense team to come out and address the media. They are still inside at this time, and right now we are just gathering sound from people who were inside and witnessed that sentencing, many of them who were here today in support of Catherine Pugh. Mallory?
All right, thank you, Dave. We're going to wait and see if their defense attorneys do come out to make a statement. But I do want to go back to Andy Alperstein, who I had to cut off earlier because Kurt Schmoke, the former Baltimore mayor and University of Baltimore president, he was one of the people who wrote a character reference letter in defense of Catherine Pugh. And Andy, we saw more than 24 letters. We saw that 13-minute apology video. What did you make of all of that?
Well, you're talking about somebody who's made a tremendous contribution to this community. She didn't just show up and become mayor. The video, which I've reviewed in its entirety, it was powerful. I mean, it was really powerful, very strong, highlighting the fact that she started the school, that she started the marathon, the Baltimore Marathon. There's stories from her people who she saved from drugs and individual stories, and she walked during the riots, went right down to the heart of it, wasn't afraid, and confronted people and calmed them down. And there's no question she's done a massive amount to help the community. Judge Chasnow's challenge was to balance that. The guidelines, which keep getting talked about, which are a range of sentences, a sentencing range, they don't consider all this. And the defense did a very nice job of sort of pulling the judge down from that range to this 3-year number. I think the defense attorneys probably feel very good that they were successful in doing that. Not good that, as former Mayor Schmoke said, that she's got to go to jail. No one probably who's close to her wanted to see that. But I think the defense even conceded that when they asked for a year, they knew there was going to be some jail component to this.
And in terms of the restitution, we're looking at, I believe it's $400,000 to the University of Maryland medical system. She may also have to forfeit her home. What's your take on the restitution ordered as of now?
Well, I think that's to be expected in an economic crime case, a fraud case like that. That doesn't mean it's actually going to be paid or that she has the resources to pay it. But obviously, we've known from the beginning of this case that University of Maryland was double billed or overbilled, so that's reflective of the amount of money that they lost. There was another judgment for an insurance fund for just under $12,000. The home, when people have assets and the government orders a forfeiture, they can either take the direct assets, in other words, if they can prove exactly what was taken, they can forfeit that, or they can do what's called substitute assets. So if she owns a house, the government's going to get it, and I don't think that's any surprise to her. I'm sure she and her lawyers reviewed that before today.
I believe her self-surrender date will be sometime in April. So can you kind of just talk us through the process as far as what comes next?
Absolutely. So we started to talk about this before the Mayor Schmoke came on. So typically, if somebody is a nonviolent criminal with not charged, when I say that, the current case or their criminal history doesn't have a reflection of violence or witness intimidation or obstructing justice, and they're on pretrial release, like former Mayor Pugh was, and they comply with those conditions, they're deemed to not be a risk of flight, and they'll give them what's called a self-surrender. This is a 70-year-old lady with no record. She's not a risk to flee. If she was going to flee, the theory is she would have already done it. As a result, they give you a notice in the mail. It seems strange, but they send you, the Marshal Service will send a defendant a letter saying, this is your date to report, and this is where you're to report. And they literally pull up to the door and knock on the door of the jail and say, I'm here for my sentence. And that's what she's going to do. So she'll get a letter telling her where to go and when.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Andy. We really appreciate it. I believe we're going to go back now to our reporter, Dave Detling, out in the field. Dave, you just spoke with a friend of the former mayor?
Yeah, absolutely. Just before the woman got in her car to leave the federal courthouse, she described herself as a personal friend. She saw Catherine Pugh as a mentor, and we're seeing a lot of individuals who have a personal connection to Catherine, and we asked her how concerned are they for Catherine Pugh and the sentencing, given her age, and she said what she's more concerned about more than anything maybe is just her mental well-being and the fact that can she handle this emotionally and mentally. She did say that in talking to Catherine Pugh leading up to today's sentencing that Catherine Pugh has been writing some books, possibly a memoir, just kind of just summarizing everything that she's been going through. But we have heard throughout the day that there is concern for her physical and emotional well-being going into her time being served. We know that next week is her birthday. She will turn 70. So there is a lot of questions about how she can handle this as a woman of her age, given all the emotional things that she's gone through leading up to today's sentencing. So again, as I mentioned in our last hit, the judge did say that she will have access to the mental needs and health in her sentencing. So again, we are waiting here for her defense team to come out and address the media. But again, a lot of her supporters, if they haven't already left, they have been offering condolences. They're saying that right now she's going to need the most support possible to get through this. But again, just to drive it home, she is not being sentenced immediately to report to jail. She has until April 13th. So again, her defense team will be in touch with the court system as to making sure that she reports on time.
And Dave, I just want to ask you, do you have a sense of the people who were in the courtroom today? Did she have a lot of supporters? Was it mostly the media? What was your kind of take? Because like you just said, there was a friend of hers, there was former Mayor Kurt Schmoke who was there.
Yeah, so during the proceeding, 5 people came up to the podium to talk about those letters, those character reference. In the crowd, there were about 140 people. Yes, of course, there was the media there. There were about 10 rows, 14 people in each, so about 140. It was difficult to gauge, but at one point, the defense attorneys, what they did was they addressed the judge and they said, I want you to look behind you right now at all of these supporters. And one man actually did say, I am not here to support Catherine Pugh. So it was hard to gauge exactly how many were in the crowd for her support, but I did see at least a group of like 8 women who were seated in the row in front of me who were here for her support. And no doubt they will be thinking about her, offering her condolences moving forward.
All right, thank you, Dave. And please stand by. We are waiting to see if her defense attorneys will be out shortly. And just to recap, what's been happening in this case, according to the government, it was over the course of around 7 years that Pugh used her self-published Healthy Holly book series to defraud purchasers such as the University of Maryland Medical System, for which she served as a board member. And while her inventory of books never exceeded 8,216 copies, through her scheme, she was able to resell 132,000 copies for a total of nearly $860,000. She also used money from the sales, along with the help of her aide, Gary Brown Jr., to make illegal contributions to her mayoral campaign. In addition, the profits were not properly disclosed on her taxes. And prosecutors detailed how Pugh leveraged the power of her elected office to corruptly solicit money from companies and organizations that might be beholden to her. And before this, in the sentencing memorandum from Pugh's defense attorneys, while we wait to hear from them, they said that she is humbled, penitent, and remorseful for her crimes, and acknowledges that her criminal conduct was serious and betrayed the values she spent a lifetime advocating and pursuing, and the collateral consequences that Ms. Pugh has suffered as a result of her offenses, including the loss of a career in public service, the stigma of forever being branded a felon, and being publicly disgraced are severe and permanent. They ensure that Ms. Pugh will never reoffend. So that was from the sentencing memorandum before we knew what the sentencing would be. In addition, we've been talking about this 13-minute video that was released yesterday. In the beginning, Pugh apologizes for her actions, and then it goes into maybe 10 minutes or so of her contributions to the city, to the state, while she served in office. She's been in elected office since the year 2000, first Baltimore City Council from 2000 to 2004. Then she went to the House of Delegates, followed by the Maryland Senate, where she rose to the majority leader. And then she narrowly defeated former Mayor Sheila Dixon in 2016 to become Baltimore's mayor. And I want to reiterate some of the things that were said in that video. If you hadn't had a chance to see it yet, it is on our website. She said, quote, "I accept total responsibility. I've pled guilty and I'm sorry. I don't know any other words that could be strong. I am so sorry." She goes on to say, "When I think about me and my capacity, my capabilities, and all of the things I've been able to do, I said, how did I end up here? How did you mess this up?" So once again, Baltimore's 50th mayor has been sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and 3 years probation. We do know that, and let's go back out to Dave Detling. He was in the courtroom all morning. And Dave, the hearing began around 10 a.m. It probably wrapped up around 12:30 or 1 o'clock or so. And can you again reiterate to me the government's position in asking for a nearly 5-year sentence? They seem content with 3 years, but what was kind of the motivating factor for asking for 5? You yourself said she's turning 70 next week.
Yeah, exactly. The government wanted to reiterate and basically say that, listen, yes, she's done all this great stuff in her public service, but don't let that take away from the severity of the fraud, the tax evasion. And what they started off at the very beginning of this hearing, they said shock. And they said that these crimes that she has committed are very serious. So they pushed up until the very end for that 5 years just or so about. And again, it was really something that we saw them go over and over. They went through 3 different points. They said that that her abuse of power. At one point, they even showed a clip from Charm TV of the former mayor at a local elementary school of one of her book drives. And they said this shows a clear calculation of exactly what she was up to, what she knew, but unbeknownst to people participating in that book drive, the schools, they didn't know what she was up to behind closed doors. So that was really a poignant moment. And they introduced that piece of video during the hearing because they wanted to also draw attention to this is the video, this is what we know, this is what investigators know about Catherine Pugh, unbeknownst to what the public sees about her. And this was really in juxtaposition to that video that you were just talking about that was released last night, where you saw Catherine Pugh profusely apologize for her actions. And again, the government even took aim at it, saying, do not be fooled by this beautifully produced 13-minute video. They even said even the music that was laid underneath it was meant to serve a purpose and draw up support, but for a leniency in the sentencing. But again, we saw that the judge really may have been swayed in some form or fashion because, again, not that 5-year sentence, but we did see the 3-year sentence handed down. So again, a lot of things happening here that we heard about, even the judge saying that she learned some new things as we were going forth. But again, we are waiting for the defense attorney, the team, to come out and address the media. But again, people are leaving slowly who have been inside the courtroom. Again, there were about 140 people, unclear how many of them were in clear support for Catherine Pugh. But people who are coming out, they continue to say they support her, and they say that this sentence was harsh. Mallory?
All right, thank you, Dave. And I want to go back to Andy Alperstein, if he's still on the line with us, former state prosecutor. And Andy, along with Catherine Pugh, 2 Baltimore City employees also pleaded guilty in this case, Gary Brown, her former advisor, and Rosalind Weddington. We haven't seen any dates for their sentencings just as yet. Do you think former Mayor Pugh's sentencing will play into theirs?
I think it's a reasonable strategy for the other folks to wait, because their lawyers will try to make a proportional argument. In other words, Mayor Pugh got 3 years. They're going to come in and say they had a lesser role in this. They weren't the leader. We should get less. So that's a reasoned strategy. I don't know that's the case, but that's certainly what I think most lawyers representing those other 2 folks would be doing.
And then, on top of that, there are some other elected officials who have also faced charges. We have former Delegate Cheryl Glenn, who pleaded guilty to bribery and fraud. Will this sentencing of Mayor Pugh set any kind of precedent or standard?
I think we have to be careful with that. Every case is different. I mean, look at the variables where Judge Chasnow was weighing with Mayor Pugh, her health, her mental health, her age, the scheme of it, the ongoing nature of it, both, sort of in aggravation of the sentence by the government and in mitigation by the defense. So you really can't compare one case to another. I think it's sort of a common thing people do, but I think it's probably not a wise thing to do.
And, in speaking of her sentencing, she pleaded guilty to 4 federal charges. If you combine the max penalty for those 4 counts, it comes to 35 years. Obviously, that was never on the table. So can you again go over the sentencing guidelines, how this government came to ask for 5, in return defense asking for 366 days, but then meeting in the middle around 3?
Right. So these guidelines were set up by the Congress to make sure that sentences around the country were even and proportional. And you can't just look at the record and the crime. There's really a whole lot of factors that go into it. And it's a point system that gets put onto a grid and comes up with a range of sentence. They're going to consider not just the crime and the record, but they're going to dive deeper into the amount of the fraud. That's going to create a certain amount of points. Whether somebody does different conducts, different acts, they're going to add to points, which are going to then go on this grid that come out to the sentence that the government announced as its recommendation. And then they recommend a sentence within the range. It used to be that the guidelines were mandatory on federal judges, but that changed many years ago. And now the judges receive those guidelines as advisory. The government typically is within the range of the guidelines, But the defense is free to argue for a lesser sentence. The defense attorneys in this case, recognizing the public trust issues and the damage to the community, chose to, I think, a wise strategy, say, we're not asking for probation. We know she's going to go to prison. We just don't know for how long, so we're going to ask for a year instead of asking for some other, some lower number that the court may discredit what they were asking for. She'll wind up serving 85% of the 3 years, and then the last 6 months, she's probably going to be eligible for like a halfway house back in the community where she's going to live. So it's really going to be closer to probably 2 years, or maybe even a little less, that she'll actually be in prison. And I expect she'll get classified to go into a federal prison camp. So I don't think she's going to be sitting in the four corners of a cell block.
And if we go back to November when she was first indicted, she was indicted on 11 charges. She decided to plead guilty to 4. Had this gone to trial, she could have been facing those 11 charges still, correct?
Absolutely. And many times the U.S. Attorney's Office in Maryland will add charges. In other words, if they don't reach a plea agreement, they can even add additional charges. That's a reasonable likelihood in a case like this because it had so many sort of twists and turns and tentacles. So there very well could have been more. But at some point, it does become a little ridiculous. She's 70 years old, and I don't think a judge would have given her 20 or 30 years, even if she went to trial and lost.
And from reading the indictment, it looked like this investigation had begun in 2017. What do you make of the, 2 years it took to pursue these charges?
Sure. That's a great question, Mallory. The federal government is incredibly thorough when they bring cases, typically. There's also some speedy trial rights that sometimes come into these things. So the government wants to be ready to go to trial as soon as they charge a case in most serious felony cases. So there's massive amounts of records to go through and other things. And they're going to do all that, and they're very careful, and they take their time. But it's not unusual in a white-collar type of ongoing crime with multiple victims and multiple institutions involved for things to take a couple years.
Thank you, Andy, so much. We actually see former Mayor Pugh walking out of the federal courthouse right now along with her attorney, Steve Silverman. It looks like they may be walking towards the podium to possibly give their reaction on the sentencing. Let's listen in. She's walking to the podium right now.
Remember when you called me and yelled at me?
Yes.
You stay strong. I'm going to keep praying for you. This is Larry Young.
Hey, Larry.
This is Joe.
Okay. Let me just first say to all the supporters, the friends, all the people who wrote on my behalf. This is, I want to say thank you to all of them. But I think the first thing I should do is apologize to the citizens of Baltimore who put their faith and trust in me as their mayor, and to all the people who put their faith and trust in me as a state senator and as a delegate. And I will remind you that one of the things that I said in the courtroom was that none of this was intentionally what it turned out to be. And today I face the justice system. And I know that the justice system is set up to protect those who violate the system and those who criminalize the system. And so as one who's gone through this, I don't wish this on anybody. Again, I'm apologetic to the citizens of Baltimore. Nobody loves Baltimore more than I do. And I think many of you followed me over the years. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I think some folks met me at 4 a.m. in the morning till 10 or 11 o'clock at night because I believe in this city. And I know that Baltimore will move forward. We've got some great people out there. I hope that will take over the realms of mayor. But what I want the citizens of Baltimore to do is to continue to believe in the future of our city. And again, I apologize to the city, the state, and I had folks who flew in from across the country today, and so I apologize to them as well. Sometimes when you think you're doing one thing, and as my mother used to say, it's not what you intend to do, it is what you do. And all of us pay the price for the things that don't turn out the way that they should turn out. I am also grateful to those members of boards and commissions that I've served over the years. And I look forward to rebuilding my life and getting myself back together. I tell you, those lights y'all shined in my on the corner of my street for those many days, it was painful. I've learned a lot of lessons. I've learned the lessons of how you make sure that what you intend to do, you get done, that you surround yourself with people, who don't want to serve you, but get the job done. And so I will take those lessons with me. I will continue to listen, learn, and I don't think this is the last chapter for Catherine Pugh, and I look forward to regaining my strength, my zeal, my love for the people of the city. And again, let me just take a moment to thank all of those people, everybody who appeared today in the courtroom. And as somebody said, they all weren't supporters, most of them were, and everybody who traveled far and near to be here, and the letters. And I want to thank my team, who fought every day on my behalf. And I should also take a moment to thank I call them my nurses and my angels. And believe it or not, I could not get up those first 60, 90 days that I laid crawled up in my bed, unable to move. I just couldn't. It was hard to face, and it is for all people. Sometimes it's hard to face what really actually does occur. So again, it's not the last you'll see of Catherine Pugh, but thank you all, and thanks to my team and my friends and everybody. Thank you.
Talk about your mental and physical well-being moving forward.
Yeah, let me just say this, because this is really hard. I think this is hard to stand here with you all. I will continue to make sure that my mental and physical health, you all know that I did suffer pneumonia and bronchitis, some other things. This is a time for me to rebuild my life, and so thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, former Mayor Pugh there saying from the words of her mother, it's not what you intend to do, it's what you do, and you eventually pay the price. Baltimore's 50th mayor today sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years probation. She's now leaving the courthouse. Reporter Dave Detling is there trying to ask her a question.
I got to get my health together.
I'm sorry?
I'm focused on my health.
Focused on your health right now. You talked about your family. What have your brothers said to you right now?
We love you. We love you. Yeah. I got
Mayor, was this all worth it?
I'm not sure what you're talking
Mayor,
about.
what would you have done differently?
Right now, I'm going to focus on my health. I'm going to focus on how I rebuild my life.
The judge said she hasn't figured out why this happened. Can you give us any idea why this happened?
I think I said this thing. I think when everything has a lesson in it. You want to make sure, and I say this for anybody who's a leader, and you want to make sure that people who are working for you are working for the task and not trying and serving. And it's not about the person that you work for, it's about the task ahead. A lot of things, I'm sure, as I contemplate this over the days ahead, that I'll evaluate and take a look at. But more importantly, I said in the courtroom, I was taught to be honest. I came from parents who taught us right from wrong. I know the 10 Commandments. And, my dad's favorite saying was dot your I's and cross your T's. And I'll dot my I's and cross my T's.
All right.
Thank you.
Live your life. Talk to you later.
Would you just tell me? I'm sorry, we didn't have this. You said that you think the sentence was fair.
All right, former Mayor Pugh. She's just gotten into her car. She's about to leave the federal courthouse. We just heard a little bit about her thoughts following the sentencing. She was apologetic to the citizens of Baltimore. She was thankful to her team. She seemed content. Obviously, it's an upsetting day for her, but she said that she plans to focus on her mental health. You could also hear some supporters in the background saying, I love you and I'm going to keep praying for you. And that, she actually had some advice for other leaders, and that's to work toward the task ahead. And let's go out to Dave Detling, who was just there walking with her. And Dave, what did you try to ask her as she was leaving?
Yeah, we wanted that human side of Catherine Pugh, one that wasn't put together by a PR team, her defense team. We wanted to see the real, raw, emotional side of Catherine Pugh. And I asked her, what did your brother say to you? Because she said her brothers were in the audience today. And she just said, again, that they love her. And you did hear one woman as we were walking along say, I love you. So despite this sentencing, everything that she has been charged with and what she pled guilty to, she does have a large portion of support from people here, and they are rallying for her. When she did take to the podium, I did ask her if she is concerned for her emotional and mental well-being, and you heard her say that that is what something she is going to be working on moving forward, is to make sure that she comes back stronger than ever. But of course, this will involve that prison sentence. So again, the judge did say that she will have access to medical treatment if needed and moving forward. But again, she is not going to report directly to jail. Again, she will have some time before she has to report. That date is April 13th. But again, you saw her leave, she got into her SUV, and right now one can only really imagine what's going through her mind now that she has the time to process this without the crowds, without the media, without the cameras. We're actually going to go back towards the front of the federal courthouse to talk to defense attorneys and just hear exactly their thoughts. So we'll send it back to you, Mallory.
All right, thank you, Dave. And Dave, actually, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
How did that Catherine Pugh in front of the podium compare to the Catherine Pugh in front of the judge before sentencing?
So when you're talking and dealing with a public official, whether present or former, they know the camera's on, just like I know the camera's on right now. So I think we got a very well-maintained, manicured Catherine Pugh, someone who is used to maybe turning off her emotions. And I think that really does speak to the facet that we heard with the government prosecutors saying this whole duality, this public versus private. So while I think we did really hear from her just a second ago, like her real true self, but the person in front of the judge at the podium, we saw a very raw Catherine Pugh, because it was her last attempt to level with the judge and say, I'm sorry, I want you to see me for the woman I am now, who is truly sorry. So the woman you just heard from, I think, is more of the Baltimore City Mayor Catherine Pugh that we're all used to seeing, who gives those prepared statements, those wonderful sound bites. But the woman we saw inside the federal courthouse was a raw, real human being who realized that she's got a whole new journey ahead of her.
All right, thank you, Dave. I'll let you get back to reporting now. I know you have a lot to put together for our 5 o'clock news. So once again, Baltimore's 50th Mayor Catherine Pugh sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years probation. We'll have all this information on our website, WMAR2news.com, and you'll see more at WMAR2 News at 5 and 6 o'clock. Thanks for joining us.